All right, let's get right into it. Electric cars versus gas cars. We're tackling one of the biggest debates out there. Which one is actually greener? It's a question a ton of people are asking, and the real answer is way more interesting than you might think. So here's the core of the debate, right? You hear it all the time. Sure, EVs don't have exhaust, but what about the batteries? Aren't they so bad to make that it cancels out all the benefits? It's a huge claim and a really important one to figure out. So today, we're going to see if that argument actually holds water. To get to the truth, we absolutely have to look at the big picture. You can't just judge a car's environmental impact by looking at its tailpipe or the factory where it was made. You gotta look at the entire story, from the moment its parts are pulled from the earth to the very end of its life. And you know what? There's actually a scientific way to do this. It's called a life cycle assessment, or LCA for short. Think of it as looking at a product from cradle to grave. This is the gold standard that major research groups use, and it's exactly how we're going to break this down: production, use, and what happens at the end. Okay, first up, the factory floor. Let's start at the very beginning, at the starting line of this race. What does it take to actually build one of these cars? And what kind of environmental toll does that process take?
And right out of the gate, we hit a pretty surprising fact. That big argument we just talked about, well, it turns out there's a little bit of truth to it. When it comes to manufacturing, an electric car actually starts with a bigger environmental footprint.
Yeah, the data is really clear on this. Top research shows that building an EV can create anywhere from 30 to 60% more CO2 emissions than building a regular gas-powered car. So, before it drives a single mile, an EV is already in a hole. It's starting the race from way behind. So, what's the deal? Why is it so much higher? Well, if you look closer, there is one main reason, and it's a big one: the battery. That's the real culprit here. Making a modern, powerful lithium-ion battery takes a ton of energy, and it can be responsible for almost half of all the emissions from building the entire car. So you can think about it like this. Every single EV rolls off the assembly line with what you might call an ecological debt. It starts its life owing the planet. The real question is, can it ever pay back that debt?
Now for round two, the open road. This is where the car is going to spend almost its entire life. And believe me, this is where the whole story completely flips on its head.
And this is where the EV starts to make its comeback, big time. I mean, a gas car is basically a rolling chemical reaction, right? It's constantly burning fuel, spewing out emissions, and it's also just shockingly inefficient. An EV, on the other hand, is the total opposite. It's super efficient and, of course, has zero tailpipe emissions. And that huge difference in how they run leads to this amazing tipping point. Studies show that in Europe, an average EV pays back its entire manufacturing debt in just 2 to 3 years of driving. Think about that for a second. After just a couple of years, it's completely erased its head start in pollution, and from that day forward, it's all green. It just builds a bigger and bigger environmental advantage for the rest of its life. But what happens at the end of the road? What about when the car is done? And more importantly, what about that battery? For a long time, this was kind of the weak spot in the whole EV argument. Let's see how that's changing. You know the worry, right? The fear was that we'd just be swapping tailpipe smog for these giant toxic battery graveyards piling up in landfills. But that's where technology and innovation are really changing the game. This changes everything. We have recycling plants now that can pull out and recover up to 95% of the most important metals inside a battery. We're talking cobalt, nickel, copper. We can create this closed-loop system where the ingredients for new batteries are hiding inside the old ones. Oh, but it gets even better than that. Before they even get recycled, most of these batteries get a whole second life. So even when a battery can't power a car anymore, it still has plenty of juice left. They can be bundled together to create these giant power banks that store energy from solar and wind farms, making our whole grid cleaner and more reliable. Okay, so let's put it all together. We've looked at the factory, the open road, and the recycling plant. After looking at the whole shebang, from cradle to grave, what's the final verdict? Well, when you add it all up, the winner is clear. And honestly, it's not even a close race. That initial ecological debt an EV starts with, it's real, but it's completely wiped out by the enormous savings over the rest of its life. Let's put a hard number on it. A major study by the International Council on Clean Transportation found that over its entire lifetime, a typical EV in Europe creates up to 69% less carbon pollution than a similar gas car. I mean, that is just a huge difference. This quote from the research really says it all. EVs don't magically eliminate pollution. They shift it. They take that environmental hit once at the very beginning and then spend the next 10 or 15 years on the road actively cleaning up their own mess. And then some. And you know the best part? As our power grids get greener and battery tech keeps getting better, that 69% advantage, well, it's only going to get bigger.